How's it going? This is Hoiman, and today we're taking a look at my own custom figure of Peppy Hare. So for the first thing, I had to decide which design of Peppy I was going to go with, and I was kind of torn between his Star Fox Assault and his Star Fox 64 3D look. And although I found more references and images of his assault look from various angles, in the end I decided to go for his 64 look, just because it seems to be the most iconic design of Peppy, and it is the first design I think of when I think of the character. So once the design was finalized, I looked at various images and angles of the character, and I drew out a rough diagram of how the figure would look and where the joints would go. Once everything was in place, I began sculpting the character using Super Sculpey, and I made sure to have all the proportions and the likeness of the character as accurate as I could, and it was difficult since this was all sculpted by hand, but I think overall it turned out quite well. Once it was all sculpted, I baked all the clay and then hardened it and began using Revoltech joints to fit in the gaps for each limb. And then I also sculpted out his coat, which is quite finicky and difficult, but in the end it turned out quite well. I then began giving the whole figure a base black colour, and this makes it easier so that the paint stays on. Once that was dry, I decided to begin painting the figure in its accurate colours. And for the scarf itself, it was originally going to be red since that's what he wears in the game, but I decided to make it green since it kind of makes for a nicer contrast from the rest of the red he wears, and he also wears a green scarf at the beginning of Star Fox 64, so there's a little attention to detail there. For his fur, I originally painted it grey since that's how he appears, but I felt it looked a bit bland and lifeless compared to the rest of the figure, so I actually decided to go for a slightly brownish wash for the fur, and he does appear to have brown fur from various pictures, so it was still accurate. I then sculpted the hand with the gun, and then I baked it, and then it was ready to paint as well. And then this just shows that I spray painted the parts white to give it a base colour, and then once that was done I just finished it off with all the little details. So you're probably wondering, why did I make a custom figure of Peppy Hare? There's already a figure of Peppy by Jack Specific, but the thing is, I actually made this figure back in 2012, and before then there was never a Peppy figure ever made. And since Peppy is my most favourite character, I decided to kind of task myself with making an actual custom figure of him, and overall I'm really proud with how he turned out. So taking a closer look at Peppy's face, I feel that I have captured the likeness of his character really well. I tried my best to make it look just like him from pretty much all angles, and overall I'm pretty impressed with the end result. Down to the torso, again I made sure to make his proportions as accurately as much as I can, and overall I feel that I have captured the likeness of his character pretty well. And then down to his shoes, try to fit in all the detail here and there, and then the sculpt took quite a long time to do as well. And then his arms, pretty well sculpted for the most part. Same for his hands. I even sculpted in the texture of his gloves, so it's nice to add all that detail. And then the coat itself is nice and smooth. It's really well sculpted for the most part. Even has the line that runs through the whole coat, and then has these side buttons as well. And then the belt, sculpted very cleanly for the most part. Same for the scarf, added in all the texture in there as well. And for the most part, the paintwork is pretty much just in the basic base colors. I didn't really go too in depth with the shading. So I made sure to make the reds and the greens very bold. Same for the blacks. And then for the silver parts and on his shoes, I used the metallic paint for those to make it kind of stand out from the contrast. And then like I already said, the shoes were pretty hard to sculpt, but I'm pretty happy with all the detail that I managed to fit in. And then painting in the black lines was pretty difficult as well. And back to the face, I'm pretty happy that I was able to paint on the eyes pretty cleanly. They were probably the most difficult part to paint on the figure since they're very small. But again, I'm pretty happy with the end result. So for articulation, the neck is on a swivel, like so. So you can mainly just turn his head left to right, and that's pretty much all the movement you can get. The torso is one solid piece, so there's no articulation there. Moving to the arms, they are on a ball joint, so you can bring his arm out to the side and then bring his arm forward to the back as well, and then swivel. And then he's got ball jointed elbows, so you can bend his arm forward and then you can also swivel them. For the wrists, they're on ball joint, so you can move his hand back and forth and then also twist, like so. For the waist, it's on a swivel, so you can twist his torso like so. And then each hip is on a ball joint, so you can kick forward about that much. And I made sure to leave a big enough gap for the legs to move forward. And then the legs can move to the side as well, like so. And then he's got the thigh swivel as well. For the knees, it's on ball joint, so you can bend his leg back like so. And then you can also swivel it about as well. And that's the same for the shoe, so you can swivel it about. But because his coat is a solid piece, it does restrict most of the movement in the legs. So for hands, he comes with one open palmed hand and then one pointing hand. And then he also comes with a hand that's holding a gun. Pretty decently sculpted for the most part. And then I made sure to add all the detail in the gun. And then he also comes with a display base. And then you just slide it in like so. So my final thoughts are, for my very first custom figure, I'm really happy with how he turned out. I feel that I have captured the likeness of the character really well, and then the sculpt took a lot of time, but I think overall it's definitely worth it, especially for a character that I really like. But there are some gripes that I do have with the figure, even though it's my own custom figure. So the first gripe is that the way that the coat is sculpted, it does tend to rub against his face when you swivel it, so it does scratch a bit of the paint off. And then there's a bit of paint missing on his arm here for whatever reason. There's a really odd cut on the coat, which I'm not too sure how that happened. And then the second is that his arms are way too long, I feel. Like in proportion with the rest of his body, they just look a bit too long. And then his hands are a bit too big as well. But sculpting in this scale, it was a bit difficult to make the hands small, so that's pretty much why they turned out so big. And then another gripe is that because the coat is solid piece, it does restrict most of his leg movement. And then I guess my final gripe is the gun itself. I feel that the detail is relatively decent, but it's sculpted really oddly. Like, I guess during baking it kind of warped a bit in the oven, so that's why it turned out a bit distorted. So quite a minor gripe, but it's nothing too major. But despite all those gripes, I'm still really proud of myself of this accomplishment in this Peppy figure. just back in 2012, seeing my most favourite character become a figure before my eyes was just really magical, and then the end result has just brought me a lot of achievement and just makes me feel really proud of myself overall. And the fact that I was able to make this figure pretty much from scratch is just very impressive to myself. And just for comparison, here's my custom figure next to the official Jakks Pacific Peppy figure. So overall it's difficult to say which one is better than the other, but for me personally, I really like both. But let me know which one you prefer down in the comments below. But that's my review on my custom figure of Peppy Hare. Thank you for watching and enjoy some pictures.